There are many reasons that people decide to can food at home. They range from food security to disaster preparedness and also to take advantage of amazing sales. I can for all of those reasons, but my number one reason is to make meal prep a breeze for my very busy family. Today I'm canning pork carnitas for my addition to the Canuary collaboration hosted by Lisa at SuttonsDaze. This recipe and the entire collaboration are amazing for those who are experienced canners and those all the way down to canning curious. So let's get started. Hey friends, welcome to my kitchen. Today we are making pork carnitas and I am using a 3-pound pork loin to do so. You can also use any other cut of pork that you might find on sale. Pork butts work well, either bone in or out, depending on if you want to trim them out. Or you can use things like beef brisket or any other beef roast that you can find. I've also done very similar things before with chicken, so think of the protein that you like best with any of the Mexican dishes that you might make at home regularly, like street tacos, burrito bowls, or even enchiladas, and just go for it. The goal is to get the meat cubed up in 1.5-inch cubes. After that, we're going to throw them on a pan and roast them off in the oven. And I will go ahead and say today is an absolute ideal canning day here at my house. The weather is disgusting in my mind. It's snowy, it's sleeting, and it is just brutal. So my kids, of course, are dressing up ready to go out and play. But for me, it's inside with a warm canner to keep myself busy, productive, and moving forward. Now that I have the meat all cubed up, I'm just going to go ahead and get it spread out really even, nice layer here on my sheet pan before going ahead and salting it. You can also add pepper if you like. It's also a good idea to toss all of the chunks and making sure that you're getting them evenly seasoned on all sides. So in whatever method you like to do that, you want to go ahead and make sure they get a really nice coating of salt. Use about a teaspoon here to get everything covered, and then pepper before going into the oven. I roasted them off at 425 for about 30 minutes. You want to make sure that they get browned before they go in the jar because that really helps to develop the flavor as well as the texture that's going to come out in your final product. While I get this put in, I want to take just a second to introduce myself to those of you who might be new to my channel. My name is Jill. I am a homeschooling mom of 5 who tries to do as much as I can to feed my family the highest quality foods at the lowest price possible. That involves a lot of canning, scratch cooking, and just homemade recipes right here from my kitchen. If those things are interesting to you, make sure to subscribe because I think you'll like what we have to share. Now, while the pork is cooking, I am going to go ahead and get my canner warmed up. Don't forget this step. It's really good to actually start with this just so you don't forget it in the meantime, but you want to go ahead and get your canner started and your jars warming up so that you don't get to the point where you have all of your broth and your meat ready and have a cold canner and cold jars to go along with it. When you are starting the canner or starting to can, one of the questions that's always hard to realize or think about is this is going to be a hot pack or a cold pack recipe, and what does that mean for the canner? But the idea is that your canner, your jars, and your food are all going in at similar temperatures. So you are never going to put hot meat and hot broth in a cold jar or a cold canner. You want everything to be similar temperature. Once you get this all figured out, then there's no checking the recipe book 1,000 times to see if this specific recipe is hot or cold. You just know. Match all of the temperatures of your ingredients to make sure that you're not giving thermal shock to your jars, busting them, and ruining all of the time that you put into the processing. Now it's time to make the broth. So you want to start with an onion, thin slice it, and then we're going to add some garlic as well. The recipe calls for 3 cloves minced, but mine were pretty small, so I went ahead and added a 4th. Getting the garlic minced up is actually pretty easy, but if you do not grow your own garlic and you want to just purchase it pre-minced, that's a great option as well. It does add a little to the cost, but it saves a lot on your prep time, so you just kind of have to weigh out where it works best for you. Here, I just smashed the garlic clove with the skin on. It helps the skin to pop right off, and then just run my knife over it until it's a consistency that I like. As we start to put the broth together, you need 2 quarts of chicken stock or chicken bone broth if you have that on hand. Of course, that will up the nutritional content. If you don't have any homemade chicken stock, you can go to the store and get it. I personally would just make sure to buy a quality or grade that's going to match the meat that you're putting in. So if you're using organic meat, make sure to use organic broth or vice versa. You want to make sure that you're using the highest quality ingredients that you can when you're canning it at home. To the stock, we're going to add the onions and garlic, as well as 2 tablespoons of dried crushed red peppers and 1.5 tablespoons of oregano, as well as an extra tablespoon of salt. This is going to simmer with the lid on for about 5 minutes. And as that timer comes to the end, your pork should almost be done as well. Now, I am choosing to bring everything over to the countertop where I have enough room for all of the supplies that I need to get the jars filled up. I have in the past went ahead and jarred up over by my stove, but I find that I make a little bit of a mess on the stovetop, and it's just easier for me to pull it all over where I have adequate countertop space to make this happen. That said, my hot canner is a few steps away. So I am going to go ahead, bring the jars still with water in them over to my sink and dump that water out. Depending on the water level in the canner, sometimes I just dump that water back in. But when I was filling this up, I went a little bit over the 2 inches that I had in mind for the canner. So this is a way for me to warm up my jars and get rid of the excess water. Now it's time for the fun part, and the part that feels super productive, which is getting the meat in the jars. Now, I like to use wide mouth jars when I'm canning with meat. I don't like to use wide mouth jars when I'm doing salsa or many other vegetables, but I really do think they make loading the meat in way easier because you don't have to worry about shoving it around the neck. That said, use what you have, use what you've been given. A lot of times I've been given jars because family members know that I'm canning now, and so they'll send them over my way. If that's you, don't hesitate to use whatever jars you can find. Even those that have been around for 50, 60 years still hold up incredibly well. Just make sure to inspect them. Any chip around the top or crack in the side could mean that all your work is for nothing. Once you have the meat in, it's time to go ahead and add the broth. Now, because this broth is mainly liquid, you have to be really careful to make sure you evenly distribute the solids that are in there. This is important to keep your flavoring consistent throughout all of the jars. The recipe calls for broth to be filled, leaving a 1-inch headspace. The debubbling tool that I'm using to get all the air out also has measuring tools on the other end, so you can make sure to verify that you are at 1 inch. But a cheat here is that lowest ring on the jar is 1 inch of headspace. So I am just using that as my measurement. And I will say it took me years to get to the point where I was able to trust my eyes and make sure that the headspace was what I was looking for without measuring. But now I've grown in confidence and know exactly where I want to stop. After getting all of the jars filled up, because we are using something with a lot of fat in it, it's important to wipe down your rings. I wipe down the rim with vinegar to make sure that nothing is going to be left that is going to impact the seal of my jar. Then I'm adding my 4 jars lids. Now, 4 jars is obviously a sponsor of Canuary, but that's not why I use them. And I didn't get sent these lids for free. I purchased 4 jars lids because they are the best quality that I have found. One thing that I have found that is key to the importance of my lids sealing is to make sure that the rings slide on really smoothly. If you're trying to work to get a ring on, it's not going to put even pressure on your lid and it's not going to seal. That's the only time I've ever had failures with the 4 jars lids. So I want to just make sure to point that out. Don't let that be you. If you are kind of working to get a ring on, throw it in the trash so you don't have to use it again. Sometimes they just get dented and dinged and don't work super well. You don't want that around. You don't want to keep it. Don't even put it in your pantry thinking you'll just use it for dry goods. Get rid of it so you don't end up using it accidentally in the canning process. While I repeat the exact same process for the next 3 jars, I want to remind you all of the Canuary rules so you can make sure that you are eligible to win the amazing prizes that are out from Lisa at SuttonsDaze, as well as 4 Jars Canning Supplies. Watch all of the Canuary content. Also, make sure to comment on the video every single day and like it. If you have friends that are interested in canning, make sure to share it with them as well. There is so much information that will be shared. I promise it'll be worth your time. And the prizes are absolutely amazing. At the end of the month, Lisa will host a live video that is so fun. I will be there and all of the prizes will be given away live on air. Now I want to share a couple tips I wish I knew when I first got started canning. The first one is know your canner. How many jars can you fit in your canner? Now, this is going to range depending on which model you have, and it can vary greatly. So my canner can do up to 18 pints at a time, which means that if I were to efficiently be using my kitchen time, I would put 3 times the amount of meat in the canner before I seal that lid and got it going. Today, though, I'm just working with the pork because that is all that I needed. But look up other things that have the same processing time as what you're planning, and that will help you to efficiently use the time that you have available. A quick Google search here told me that anything meat chunk, meat strip, or ground meat could all go in for the exact same amount of time. Now, in the past, I have canned hamburger. I've also canned sausage. I loved the sausage. We hated the hamburger. So if you have canned hamburger in the past and it turned out great, let me know your secret, because for us at this point, we are just prepping our hamburger and then freezing it. But that does not provide the same shelf stability and meal prep speed that comes along with a canned food, because we don't have to go through the time to thaw it in any way. My second tip is to make sure that you shop Facebook Marketplace. You can find things like jars. You can also find things like canners and canning cookbooks and all of the basics that you need to get started. You don't have to make large investments to get going and increasing your food security and making meal prep easier. So keep your eyes out when people are letting go of things. I've picked up new canners that were literally used one time. Great stack of cookbooks, all at cost way below what I would have paid for them if I would have bought them new. So anything kitchen related that you're looking for, even down to like dehydrators or other food preservation methods, can be found on Facebook Marketplace if you're patient and spend the time it takes to take a look. Now, I'm putting my lid on here, so I want to give you the details of exactly what I'm doing. This is an all-American. There is no gasket to seal in between the two pieces of metal, so it's important to wipe it down, if not every single time, at least every other time, to make sure that there is oil in there that helps to properly seal the canning lid. If you do not get a good seal, you will not come to pressure. So it is a lot of stress. It is not fun, and you want to make sure to get that lid on properly. If you are looking at canners, and our new 4 jars actually has a great canner that is way easier to use than this one and way easier to get used to. I just got this one before they came out with theirs and was interested in something where I could double stack quart jars, which this All-American does allow me to do. So that was my reason for going in this direction. But if I was telling somebody new who was looking for a canner and going to make a purchase, starting with something like the All-American canner takes a lot of this process out and makes it way easier to get started. Now I have my canner brought up to temperature, have my steady stream of steam, and it's time to set my timer for 10 minutes to make sure that the canner is fully vented off, at which time I can add my canning weight and wait patiently for that first jiggle of the weight. It is not until you hear that first jiggle that you can actually start your canner. So when I first started canning, my mind said, okay, this is going to take 75 minutes to process. Not the case. You have to wait, pull it up to temperature, get it there, listen for the first jiggle, and then start your 75 minutes. So the thing about canning is you need to make sure that you're going to be home. It's not that canning actually takes a lot of hands-on time, but it does take a lot of being at home time. Once I got it up to temperature and got that first jiggle, I still remained in the kitchen for 15-20 minutes to make sure I was managing the temperature and I didn't over pressure the canner. So this is something that takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you do it a time or two, it's really, really simple and is huge for food security as well as meal prep. Now, once the canning time is up, you just can't take off the lid. You got to wait a while. So I let the pressure come all the way down to 0. Then set my timer for about 3 to 5 minutes, took the lid off and set it kind of sideways so it could still vent. I make sure to take these steps because it is important that the meat and the contents in the jar not have really fast pressure changes, or it can siphon, it can come out the top, and it can really impact your seal. Once my jars are out of the canner, I make sure to hang around the kitchen and listen for the pop. It is so satisfying after all the time that's been invested to get the meat in the jar, to hear that seal and know that it is a job well done. And as usual, all 6 of these did seal. I left them on the counter overnight so that they could cool. And then the next morning, I am getting them cleaned up and ready for the shelf. If you would like to see what meals I make with this pork, make sure to subscribe to my channel and hang out for my pantry challenge content because I will be using this in a future upload. I also have 1 week left on a giveaway that I have going over there for some seed starting trays. So if you're into gardening, make sure to check that out. I will link it at the end. But for now, I want to thank Lisa again for inviting me to her Canuary collaboration. I hope y'all learned something, and I cannot wait to see you back soon.